On March 21st, 2025, the YouTube world was shaken by the heartbreaking loss of Steve Wallis's beloved wife, Jess. What happened next was something no one could have predicted. Steve, known for his joyful camping videos and warm personality, now faced an unimaginable reality, grieving the love of his life in front of millions of his followers. But how did this tragedy unfold? While viewers continued to follow his journey, Steve's vulnerability became an inspiration for many. Yet, behind the camera, there were moments of pain and sorrow that he kept hidden from the world. Before Steve Wallis became known to millions as the Canadian YouTuber behind Camping with Steve, his life was marked by modest beginnings and an upbringing that, while not filled with extravagance, laid the groundwork for the unique path he would later follow. Born in British Columbia, Canada, Steve didn't grow up in the lap of luxury. Like many people in small-town or rural Canada, he learned the value of hard work early on. But unlike the typical trajectory of success through conventional careers or urban life ambitions, Steve began to forge a connection with the outdoors, a bond that would define his identity for decades to come. In his younger years, he often felt out of place in societal structures that championed wealth accumulation or corporate status. Instead, Steve found solace in nature, solitude, and simplicity. However, it wasn't a smooth journey. He had to navigate numerous financial hurdles and employment struggles, and like many young adults without a clear path, Steve experimented with different jobs and living situations in search of stability and meaning. One of the lesser-known aspects of Steve's early life is just how close he came to complete destitution. Before his YouTube channel ever took off, Steve faced financial instability that many people would find overwhelming. There were times when he wasn't sure where his next paycheck would come from, and he was forced to get creative just to survive. The van life, which later became a unique aspect of his YouTube persona, was not originally a quirky lifestyle choice. It was a necessity. These tough circumstances weren't shared openly for sympathy or attention. Instead, they were formative experiences that helped shape the humble, down-to-earth personality people have come to love. Steve never glamorized poverty or tried to sell his struggle as a brand. He simply lived through it, learned from it, and moved forward. These early struggles also contributed to his unique philosophy on life, one that values experience over possessions, peace over pressure, and creativity over conformity. It's no coincidence that he turned to camping as a regular practice. For Steve, setting up a tent in the wilderness wasn't just a weekend hobby. It was a metaphor for resilience, independence, and freedom from society's often oppressive expectations. Fans may now see him in humorous videos, building makeshift camps in the woods or behind shopping malls, but those who look deeper can sense that every step of his journey is rooted in a deeper truth. That hardship, when met with determination and ingenuity, can be transformed into purpose. Steve Wallis's early life wasn't easy, but it's precisely those trials that laid the foundation for the man he is today, a man who turned pain into peace and struggle into strength. But what was it that finally gave Steve the courage to leave behind a traditional path and embrace a life of uncertainty? As he stumbled through the dark times, something shifted that would forever alter the course of his life. Could a single moment of clarity have been the catalyst for his transformation? When people first stumbled upon Steve Wallis's YouTube channel, many were drawn to the novelty of what he called urban stealth camping. Sleeping in alleyways, behind big box stores, or tucked away in city parks, it seemed like a quirky experiment in frugality and outdoor survival. But what many didn't realize at the time was that this concept wasn't just a clever video idea or some viral stunt. It was born out of real necessity. Before Steve had a loyal audience or any sort of financial comfort, he was living in a van. And not in the trendy, Instagram-worthy van life sense of the term, but in the raw, unfiltered version where survival was the goal, not aesthetics. Living in a vehicle, especially in harsh Canadian climates, isn't just inconvenient. It can be downright dangerous. And for Steve, it wasn't always a choice, it was a last resort. In his own words, Steve has hinted that during some of the toughest chapters of his life, the van was his only option. He wasn't playing pretend. There were no brand sponsorships or luxury conversions to make life easier. He used whatever materials he could find to insulate the van, cooked his food on makeshift stoves, and constantly had to avoid trouble, be it from law enforcement, strangers, or the brutal cold. The pressure of not knowing where you'll sleep without getting caught, or whether you'll be warm enough through the night, took a psychological toll. And yet, instead of hiding that period of his life, Steve embraced it. Over time, he transformed the hardship into content, offering an honest glimpse into a lifestyle that many people are forced into due to financial hardship, mental health issues, or societal disconnection. His approach to urban stealth camping wasn't about sensationalism, it was about normalizing survival. In doing so, he gave a face to a community of people often ignored or stigmatized. His videos brought light to the experience of being unhoused, or nearly so, in a way that was dignified and respectful. Through clever commentary, dry humor, and practical tips, Steve showed that even when life strips you down to the basics, you can still find moments of peace, joy, and even humor. Fans appreciated his candor, but many didn't fully understand just how close to the edge he had once lived. That van wasn't just a mode of transportation or a backdrop for quirky adventures. It was his home, his sanctuary, and at times, his only defense against the world. What makes Steve's story even more inspiring is that he never played the victim. He never used his past as a tool for sympathy. Instead, he invited people into his world not to feel sorry for him, but to better understand the realities that so many others silently endure. Through urban stealth camping, Steve turned a painful chapter of his life into a movement, a blend of survival, creativity, and the quiet rebellion of someone who refused to give up. As Steve's channel continued to grow, he found himself at a crossroads. With each new video, his audience expanded, and with that came new opportunities. But as Steve ventured further into the spotlight, he began facing pressures that many don't consider when they look at his success. How far would he go to maintain his authenticity while navigating the world of YouTube fame? Behind the camera, there were challenges he never anticipated, challenges that threatened the very essence of what made his content so real. What does a man do when the world begins to change, but he's determined to stay the same? While Steve's story may seem like a triumph of resilience and determination, there were moments when his journey veered dangerously close to collapse. The deeper he went into the world of urban stealth camping, the more he realized that his past wasn't as far behind him as he thought. As the stakes got higher, would he still be able to live up to his promise of staying true to himself? Or would the very survivalist ethos that made him famous become the thing that broke him? The pressure to stay authentic was mounting, and Steve was about to face a defining moment that no one could have predicted. Would he rise, or would he be swallowed by the very life he had worked so hard to build? For Steve Wallis, YouTube wasn't just a platform. It became a lifeline during one of the most uncertain periods of his life. When he uploaded his first video in 2010, it wasn't with the expectation of becoming an online sensation or building a massive community. He was simply documenting his unusual experiences: urban stealth camping, budget outdoor adventures, and alternative approaches to survival. What started as a quiet outlet for creativity and self-expression would eventually evolve into something far more significant: a full-time career, a source of emotional healing, and a window into a different kind of life. But the road from obscure content creator to beloved internet figure was anything but easy. In fact, the early years were full of doubt, inconsistency, and the nagging question of whether anyone would care about his low-budget, off-the-grid lifestyle. In the early stages, Steve didn't have the kind of production value or marketing know-how that many YouTubers use to build their channels. There were no flashy graphics, clickbait thumbnails, or viral challenges. Just Steve, a camera, and the raw reality of life on the fringe. He filmed using basic equipment and edited videos with simplicity. Yet, that unpolished authenticity is exactly what began to attract viewers. While the internet was saturated with highly produced content designed to impress, Steve's videos stood out for their honesty and vulnerability. He wasn't trying to be someone he wasn't. He was just a guy surviving with humor, practicality, and a deep appreciation for the outdoors. Still, making YouTube work as a full-time endeavor was an uphill battle. Steve didn't go viral overnight. He had to slowly build his audience, respond to feedback, and figure out how to balance his personal life with the increasing demands of content creation. He had to learn how to navigate YouTube's algorithm, understand monetization rules, and build a sustainable workflow. And while all that was happening, he was also fighting inner battles: financial anxiety, the psychological effects of living on the edge, and the ongoing pressure to remain consistent and creative. Every time he uploaded a video, he was putting a piece of himself out into the world, unsure of how it would be received. Eventually, the channel began to gain traction. People resonated with his laid-back attitude, unconventional wisdom, and the sense of peace his camping videos provided. What Steve had unintentionally built was more than a YouTube channel. It was a community. Fans began to see his content not just as entertainment, but as a kind of therapy. Viewers found comfort in the solitude of his outdoor adventures and inspiration in his humble approach to life. And for Steve, this connection went both ways. YouTube didn't just give him a career, it gave him purpose, stability, and a reason to keep moving forward. Among all the challenges Steve Wallis has faced, none compare to the devastating loss of his beloved wife, Jessica Audrey Wallis. Known to his audience as a quiet, behind-the-scenes presence, Jessica wasn't often featured in Steve's videos, but those who followed his journey knew just how deeply she impacted his life and his work. Her role wasn't in front of the camera, but she was an anchor in Steve's life, offering support, stability, and a sense of peace that grounded him through all the unpredictability of his unconventional path. When Steve announced Jessica's sudden passing on August 25, 2022, the news stunned his audience. The grief in his voice, the raw pain in his eyes, it was a heartbreaking moment that revealed a side of Steve few had seen before. Steve shared the tragic news through a somber video, explaining that Jessica had passed away unexpectedly in her sleep. His words were slow and trembling, and the weight of his loss hung heavy in every sentence. He had returned from a camping trip, one of many he filmed for his growing audience, only to discover the unimaginable. It was a shock not just to him, but to everyone who had grown to admire his gentle spirit and the quiet life he had built with her. For Steve, Jessica was more than just a life partner. She was his world. Her encouragement allowed him to explore his creativity, and her belief in his mission gave him the confidence to share his unique way of life with the world. In the aftermath of her passing, Steve opened up to his audience with a level of vulnerability that few content creators ever dare to show. He didn't hide his grief or try to mask it with productivity. Instead, he allowed himself to be fully human, confused, shattered, and aching. He admitted to feeling lost, unsure of how to go on, and overwhelmed by the thought of facing life without her. The YouTube community responded with an outpouring of love, compassion, and support. Thousands of comments flooded in, offering condolences, prayers, and stories of their own losses. Steve's pain became a mirror for others, and in sharing his heartbreak, he created a space for healing, not just for himself, but for so many others who had suffered in silence. Jessica's death wasn't just a personal tragedy, it was a turning point. It changed the tone of Steve's content and shifted his outlook on life. The videos that followed carried a deeper sense of reflection, of fragility, and of the quiet strength it takes to carry on. Even in her absence, Jessica's spirit lingers in every video Steve makes. Her memory lives on in the peaceful moments around the campfire, in the soft laughter over a tin of beans, and in the deep, enduring love that Steve continues to carry with him. Her loss was a devastating blow, but also a reminder of the profound impact one person can have, not only on a partner's life, but on an entire community. After the sudden and tragic passing of his wife, Jessica Audrey Wallis, Steve Wallis found himself thrust into an unfamiliar and painful spotlight, grieving publicly. For someone who had always maintained a level of privacy despite his growing online fame, opening up about such a deeply personal loss wasn't something Steve had prepared for. Yet, in the days and weeks that followed Jessica's death, he chose to share his grief openly with the very audience that had grown to respect his honesty and humility. What followed was an emotional journey through mourning, memory, and the struggle to simply keep going. Steve's transparency in the face of unimaginable pain became one of the most raw and human experiences ever shared on his channel. The grief was evident in everything he did, from his slow and quiet speech and videos to the increasingly contemplative tone of his content. The man who once made viewers laugh with "Step 2, crack a beer" now seemed like a shadow of himself, weighed down by the crushing burden of loss. Yet, instead of stepping away completely, Steve allowed his viewers to witness what it's really like to lose someone you love. He didn't sugarcoat it. He didn't wrap it up in some polished, cinematic narrative. He simply spoke from the heart, about the small moments that reminded him of Jessica, the sudden waves of sorrow that would hit without warning, and the eerie silence that filled the spaces where laughter used to live. Navigating grief is hard enough in private, but for someone with a public platform, the weight of expectation can make it even harder. Fans wanted to see him heal, to smile again, to go back to the Steve they remembered. But as Steve made clear, grief doesn't follow a script. There were no timelines, no easy fixes, and no perfect video that could capture the depth of what he was feeling. Still, he kept going, not for the views or the income, but because continuing his channel became a form of therapy. Filming, editing, camping, it all helped him find small pockets of peace amid the chaos of mourning. Perhaps most touching of all was how Steve chose to honor Jessica's memory. He launched initiatives encouraging his viewers to do something kind in her name, volunteer at a food bank, donate to a charity, or help someone in need. He wanted her legacy to be more than just sorrow. He wanted her spirit of kindness and compassion to ripple outward into the world. While Steve Wallis is known for his calm demeanor, gentle humor, and easygoing presence around the campfire, what often remains unseen are the internal battles he has quietly endured, especially when it comes to mental health. For someone who spends so much time in solitude, sleeping in forests, alleys, and riversides, there's an unspoken truth. Sometimes the wilderness is not just a backdrop, but an escape. The loss of his wife, Jessica, was a devastating blow, but it was only one piece in a much larger puzzle of emotional struggle that Steve has carried, often silently, behind the scenes. For many people, mental health challenges are hidden behind smiles or distractions, and Steve, though incredibly honest with his viewers, still bears a quiet burden that even his most loyal fans may only glimpse in passing. There's a unique kind of loneliness that comes with being a public figure whose brand is built on solitude. Steve's adventures into the woods or abandoned places may appear peaceful, even fun, but for someone wrestling with grief, anxiety, or depression, that solitude can become a double-edged sword. Alone with his thoughts and memories, Steve often finds himself walking the thin line between peace and pain. His moments of reflection, captured in the soft hum of a lantern or the crackle of a small fire, often carry a weight that words can't fully express. Viewers have noted how his tone changed after Jessica's passing, slower, more melancholic, and filled with pauses that seem to hold back floods of emotion. Even before tragedy struck, Steve has always presented himself as someone who isn't chasing fame, fortune, or even admiration. His love for simple living and his resistance to conventional societal expectations suggest a deeper disconnection from the frantic pace of modern life, a pace that often leaves those with anxiety or depression feeling alienated. While he hasn't explicitly labeled himself as someone dealing with mental illness, the signs are there for those who know what to look for: the desire to disappear into nature, the avoidance of crowds and loud environments, the comfort found in quiet repetition, and the emotional labor it takes just to make a video after suffering a traumatic loss. One of the most powerful aspects of Steve's story is that he continues to show up. He creates not because it's easy, but because it's meaningful. His channel has become a quiet beacon for those who also struggle with mental health, but don't know how to talk about it. He proves that you don't have to be loud to be strong, and that healing doesn't always come in big, dramatic moments. It often comes in tiny victories, like making it through another night in the woods, or getting out of bed to film a simple, comforting video. Steve Wallis is not just a camper or YouTuber, he's a survivor, carrying invisible wounds with grace and resilience, and reminding all of us that even in our darkest hours, there is still light to be found. Despite the many tragedies Steve Wallis has faced, from financial hardship and periods of homelessness to the earth-shattering loss of his wife, he remains a symbol of quiet resilience, not through grand gestures or flashy announcements, but in the simple, deliberate choice to keep going, to keep filming, to keep showing up. While many people would have disappeared from the public eye after suffering such unimaginable pain, Steve found a way to turn his grief into something meaningful. And though his tone may be more somber now, and the sparkle in his eyes dimmed by loss, there's a different kind of strength shining through, one rooted in endurance, honesty, and a deeper sense of purpose. After Jessica's passing, Steve began reevaluating everything, not just his content, but his life. Who was he now without her? How could he continue making videos that once felt like joyful escapes, now weighed down by sorrow? For a time, he admitted he didn't know if he could continue. And yet, bit by bit, he did. He returned to the woods. He lit his little fires. He whispered into the camera late at night, sharing his thoughts with the world not as a YouTuber chasing views, but as a human being trying to heal. Through that process, something remarkable began to happen. His channel, once built around quirky camping challenges and stealth adventures, evolved into something more profound, a space for connection, reflection, and emotional honesty. Many of his viewers, especially those dealing with grief, depression, or isolation, found renewed comfort in his content. Steve wasn't pretending to be okay. He wasn't slapping a smile over heartbreak. He was simply being real, and in doing so, he became even more relatable, more respected, and more loved than ever.